Imagine this. You wake up one morning and nothing around you is false. No white lies, no pretenses, no polite nods to social norms that you inwardly loathe. Your reflection in the mirror doesn't flatter or deceive. You see yourself exactly as you are, not as others want you to be, not as you've pretended to be. Just you, unvarnished, raw, real. Now step outside. Every interaction is unfiltered. The colleague who usually smiles at you through gritted teeth says nothing. The friend who supports your dreams out loud but doubts you in private no longer masks their skepticism. Your partner no longer says I'm fine when they're not. No one tells you what you want to hear. They tell you what is, and more than that, you do the same. There's no playing along, no smiling through resentment, no shrinking your truth to fit into someone else's comfort zone. Just ruthless, untamed honesty. Sounds terrifying, doesn't it? But why? If we claim to want truth, to value authenticity, to hate being lied to, why does the idea of a life without lies feel so deeply unsettling? Why does the notion of full honesty make our stomachs clench, our minds recoil, our hearts panic? Because somewhere, deep down, we know this. Lies are the thread holding together the fragile fabric of society and ourselves. We lie to protect others, but more often, we lie to protect ourselves from discomfort, from rejection, from confrontation, from chaos. We tell ourselves stories. I'm fine. It's not a big deal. They meant well. This is just how life is. Stories designed not to illuminate, but to numb, to help us function in marriages we resent, jobs we despise, systems we silently loathe. But what if these lies don't protect us? What if they're the cage? What if the very act of lying, especially to yourself, is the reason you never feel whole, never feel seen, never feel free? There's a cruel paradox hidden here. The more we lie to make life easier, the harder it becomes to live it fully. The more we soften reality, the more we dissolve meaning. In our attempts to preserve peace, we murder truth, and without truth, there can be no real peace, only sedation. So ask yourself this: what would your life look like if you stopped lying, not just to others, but to yourself? Would your job survive it? Would your friendships, your marriage? Would you still live where you live, dress how you dress, say what you say? Or would it all come crashing down the moment you stopped pretending? Could you bear it? Could anyone? This is not a hypothetical curiosity. It is the sharp edge of a blade. We all walk daily, 1,000 micro decisions. Smile or speak up, agree or resist, post the filtered version or share the truth, pretend it's fine or confess that it's not. And here's the real twist: we're not just afraid of other people's lies, we're afraid of their truths, terrified even, because if someone else lives without pretending, it throws into brutal contrast all the places we still pretend. It exposes our masks, our weakness, our borrowed identities. So we call them radicals, rebels, misfits. We exile the truth tellers. We cancel them, mock them, call them too intense, because their clarity makes our illusions unbearable. But deep down, part of us envies them, because they're free, and we're not. Not yet. You've felt it before, haven't you? That restless voice in the back of your mind whispering, this isn't who you really are. That sting of cognitive dissonance when you laugh at a joke you don't find funny, agree with a value you don't believe in, stay silent when everything in you is screaming to speak. That haunting ache that follows you home at night, the sense that you've betrayed something sacred, that you traded truth for acceptance. Again, so here's the question: is it possible to live a life without lies? Not a life of cruelty or brutalism, but one of radical truth. What would it cost? What would it free? And most dangerously, what would it reveal? This is not just a philosophical riddle. It's a question that carves through the core of your identity. Because to live without lies isn't about becoming better. It's about becoming real. And now we go deeper into the roots of the hidden addiction to lies and what it's costing you silently every day. What is a lie really? At face value, it's a distortion of truth. But beneath that it's a defense mechanism, a survival tool, a socially acceptable drug we take daily to soften the edges of reality. But how did this become normal? Why is lying not just to others, but to ourselves so deeply embedded into the human experience? To understand this, we must descend into the subconscious, into the philosophical shadows where few dare to look, because the origin of self-deception is not rooted in weakness, but in fear. Carl Jung called it the persona, the mask we wear to function in society, not inherently evil, but dangerous when mistaken for the self. You start by pretending to be confident until you forget that you're pretending. You show compassion out of obligation until you can't tell if it's real. The mask fuses with your identity, and once that happens, you no longer lie to others, you live a lie as yourself. We begin this performance early, childhood, the moment we realize that certain emotions are bad, that anger makes us difficult, that fear makes us weak, that curiosity makes us disrespectful. And so, piece by piece, we suppress the parts of ourselves deemed unacceptable. Not because we're evil, because we want to belong. That's the tragic paradox of the human condition. We will trade authenticity for approval every time, unless we wake up. Nietzsche warned us of this slumber. In his writings, he called out the herd morality that forces individuals to conform, to compromise, to dilute their essence in the name of social harmony. He didn't hate morality, he hated inauthentic morality, the kind passed down blindly, the kind that silences the individual for the comfort of the group. And when you lie, especially to yourself, that's what you're doing, choosing comfort over clarity, safety over soul. But comfort is not peace, and clarity is not cruelty. This is the hidden problem. You've been trained to associate truth with danger, to equate honesty with isolation. Why? Because the first time you spoke your truth, you were punished, not physically maybe, but emotionally. You were mocked, dismissed, told to be realistic, told to lower your voice, to not ask too many questions. And so you learn it. You learned that truth isn't safe, that honesty costs too much. So you adapted, and adaptation became identity. But the price of adaptation is fragmentation. The more you suppress your truth to keep others comfortable, the more disconnected you become from your own inner voice. Your inner compass begins to falter. You don't know what you feel anymore. You ask others what you should think. You outsource your morality. You become a stranger to yourself. Schopenhauer, the grim philosopher of will, might say this is inevitable, that life is suffering, and we lie to make the pain bearable. But what if the greater suffering isn't the pain of truth, but the numbness of deception? Because that's what lies do. They numb, and the more you lie, the more numb you become, until you don't feel much of anything at all, just the vague hum of anxiety, the persistent feeling of being out of place, the creeping suspicion that something's missing but you don't know what. That something is you, the real you, the one buried beneath the layers of societal expectations, childhood conditioning, polite dishonesty, and performative virtue. You've been told that telling the truth will hurt others. But the deeper truth, you lie more to avoid hurting yourself, to avoid the discomfort of change, the burden of responsibility, the terrifying confrontation with your own unmet potential. Because if you told the truth to your partner, your boss, your friends, your family, it might unravel your whole life. But what kind of life unravels when you speak the truth? Only the one built on lies. Aldous Huxley, in Brave New World, warned of a future not dominated by censorship, but by distraction, not by the suppression of truth, but by drowning it in irrelevance. We are seeing that now. Social media doesn't force you to like trains, you to curate your life until the curation becomes the lie. It rewards you for appearing rather than being, for seeming happy, not for being whole. Oh, what do? Most people double down. More filters, more masks, more agreeable silence, until the lie becomes so familiar, it feels like home. And then you wake up one day and realize, I don't know who I am anymore. Jean-Paul Sartre believed that man is condemned to be free, that we are thrust into existence with no blueprint, no divine instruction, no guaranteed meaning. And so we construct stories about ourselves, about others, about life, stories that give us meaning. But stories, when clung to blindly, become prisons. The lie is not just in what we say, it's in what we believe. I could never do that. They wouldn't understand. I'm not good enough. It's too late. These aren't statements. They're beliefs, assumptions you've mistaken for reality, lies dressed in the costume of certainty. But what if they're not true? What if the only thing standing between you and the life you were meant to live is a carefully constructed illusion? You might think you're protecting others by lying, but the first person betrayed is always you. And each lie, no matter how small, deepens the fracture in your soul. So here's the wound. We lie because we're afraid that our truth is unlovable. But maybe, just maybe, the only way to be truly loved is to be truly known. And the only way to be known is to stop hiding. Now that we've exposed the roots of this disease, it's time to look at what it's doing to your life in ways you haven't even realized. You walk through your life like an actor who has forgotten the script, but keeps performing anyway. You smile when expected. You say what won't cause friction. You check the boxes: job, relationship, social life, yet something gnaws at you when the noise dies down. An ache beneath the surface, a kind of invisible decay. But what is it? It's the slow rot of unreality. Not dramatic, not explosive, just steady, quiet, soul-deep erosion. Lying to others is one thing, but the moment you begin lying to yourself, repeating things like "this is fine, this is what I want, I'm happy," even when your body screams otherwise, a fracture begins, a tiny splinter between your truth and your presentation. Over time, that splinter grows into a canyon. Here's the terrifying part. You adapt. You begin building a personality to survive in this false life, one that is agreeable, polite, competent, but hollow. You become a functioning shell, outwardly successful, inwardly fragmented. Cognitive dissonance is the term psychology gives this torment. The tension between what you know deep down and what you pretend on the surface. Your mind tries to resolve the contradiction. But if you've built your life on these contradictions, it can't. So the pressure builds, subtle, then unbearable. And what happens when the truth is buried too long? It mutates. It emerges as anxiety, depression, fatigue, indecision. You can't focus. You're always tired. You lose interest in things you used to love. You say, "I'm just burnt out." But what if you're not burnt out? What if you're bored of being someone you're not? You think you're failing at life. But what if you're just failing at living a lie? This is the trap no one talks about. You wake up every day and move through a world that rewards performance over presence, branding over being. You tailor your behavior to fit in. And yet every time you lie to keep the peace, you start a war within yourself. There's a cost to this. You can't connect deeply with others when you aren't connected to yourself. Conversations feel hollow. Relationships feel unfulfilling. Intimacy becomes impossible because you've never brought your real self to the table. How can someone truly love you if you never let them see you? Loneliness isn't the absence of people. It's the absence of self in the presence of others. Neurologically, your brain begins wiring around the lie. Every time you repress a truth about what you want, how you feel, who you are, your nervous system interprets it as danger, a betrayal of authenticity. Over time, you enter a low-grade survival mode, constant alertness, irritability, emotional numbness. You think it's stress, but it's actually self-abandonment. Bessel van der Kolk, in The Body Keeps the Score, writes about how unexpressed truth manifests in the body. Trauma isn't always born from catastrophe. Sometimes it's the accumulation of 1,000 swallowed emotions, 1,000 silenced moments. Your body remembers what your mouth forgets. Society too begins to reflect this sickness. We build cultures on half-truths and politeness, on curated identities and social scripts. Everyone is performing, and no one knows who started the act. So we pass the mask from one to another, pretending, smiling, agreeing until we forget there was ever a face beneath. And then we wonder why no one feels seen. We wonder why we feel so alone in a world filled with people. The greatest tragedies often stem not from evil intentions, but from the avoidance of truth. Marriages collapse not from hatred but from years of polite silence. Friendships die not from betrayal but from unspoken resentment. Talents go undeveloped not from laziness but from the false belief, I'm not good enough. Every lie is a door closed, a version of you left unexplored, a path never taken. But the worst part, you become complicit in your own diminishment. You start editing your desires to match what's expected. You suppress your instincts to stay liked. You lie just enough to not make waves, until eventually, you forget how to swim. And when you finally try to reclaim your truth, you don't know what it is anymore. Philosopher Søren Kierkegaard said, the most common form of despair is not being who you are. Not failure, not poverty, but disconnection from the self. That subtle despair becomes the background music of your life. It doesn't scream, it hums. It hums while you scroll. It hums while you laugh at jokes you don't find funny. It hums while you say I'm fine for the 100th time. And that hum will stay until you confront it. This is the unseen consequence. When you choose the comfort of a lie over the discomfort of truth, you trade temporary harmony for long-term disintegration. But that disintegration isn't final. It's a signal, a call to return to something you left behind, your integrity, not in the moralistic sense, but in the literal one. Integrity from integer, meaning whole and broken, unified. The truth doesn't just set you free, it makes you whole. But truth is a fire. It burns away what doesn't belong. So the question is not, will telling the truth hurt? It's, are you willing to be reborn through that fire? Because to live without lies is not just to speak the truth, it is to become it. And that journey begins with rebellion. You don't need to be saved. You need to remember. You need to remember who you were before the world taught you to lie before the masks, the scripts, the edits. You weren't always this way. You didn't always censor yourself. There was a time you spoke your mind without flinching, loved without calculation, laughed without wondering if someone else thought it was too loud. So, what happened? You were domesticated. It didn't come with chains or cages. It came with rewards and punishments, approval and rejection. You learned that truth had consequences and lies, however small, brought comfort. You adapted, you survived, but now you want to live, and living demands rebellion. But rebellion doesn't begin with shouting. It begins with noticing. Start here. What truth have you been avoiding? Not the obvious one, the deep one. The one that makes your stomach tighten when you think about it. The one you whisper to yourself in the middle of the night but erase in the morning. That's where the revolution begins. Not in some grand gesture, in the quiet courage of honesty. Carl Jung once said, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. That's the sickness of our time, not a lack of intelligence or resources, but an epidemic of avoidance. We distract ourselves with endless scrolling, busy schedules, curated identities, anything to keep from looking inward. But the cost of avoidance is self-fragmentation. So the first act of rebellion is this: face yourself, not the polished version, the raw one. Stand in front of the metaphorical mirror and refuse to look away. Ask, who am I when no one is watching? What have I been pretending not to feel? What do I really want beneath the expectations? Write it down. Say it out loud. Don't filter. Don't fix. Just face it. Then comes the second act. Tell the truth. This doesn't mean broadcasting your confessions to the world. It means refusing to participate in your own falseness. It means saying no when you mean no. Saying I don't know instead of pretending. Saying I'm not okay when your voice shakes. Truth in action is more powerful than truth in theory. Truth is subversive. It threatens comfort, but births clarity. It shatters illusions, but rebuilds integrity. And now comes the most dangerous act of all. Change your life to match your truth. This is where most people stop, because telling the truth without consequences is tolerable. But what happens when your truth demands a new job, a new relationship, a new identity? What if your truth threatens everything you've built? Let it, because anything built on a lie was never yours to begin with. You are not here to live a life that merely looks good. You are here to live a life that feels true. But the world won't applaud you for it. When you begin telling the truth consistently, relentlessly, you will lose things. You will lose fake friends. You will lose shallow opportunities. You will lose the comfort of the known. But you will gain something far greater, yourself. You will meet people who are drawn to your depth, not your performance. You will create work that flows from the core of your being, not from market trends. You will find peace, not the numbness of avoidance, but the fierce clarity of alignment. That is the reward of rebellion. You may ask, is it selfish to put truth above harmony? No, because harmony that depends on your silence is not. Harmony, it's hostage-taking. When you live in truth, you liberate others to do the same. Your courage becomes contagious. Your authenticity becomes a permission slip. You stop being a mirror of what others want to see and become a torch for what they forgot they could be. This is how cultures change, not through mass movements, but through individuals who refuse to lie. Look at history. Socrates drank poison rather than abandon the truth. Galileo risked exile to speak what he saw in the stars. Solzhenitsyn, imprisoned for writing what was forbidden, sighed, "Let the lie come into the world, but not through me." These were not loud men. They were truthful men, and their truth outlived empires. But what about fear? You will feel fear. Truth always awakens fear, but you must learn to distinguish between two kinds. 1. The fear that comes from danger. 2. The fear that comes from stepping into your power. The first is a warning. The second is a test. Most people run from both. But you're not most people. You're here reading this because you're ready to walk into the fire, not to be destroyed but to be revealed. You are not lost. You are layered. Every lie, every compromise, every adaptation was a layer of survival. But now the season has changed. Survival is no longer enough. It's time to shed, to strip away, to burn. What remains will not be a version of you. It will be you, and translated, unapologetic, undeniable. This is the rebellion. To become indivisible, to say, I will not abandon myself, no matter the cost. And in that defiance, you'll discover something incredible. Truth is not a prison, it's a doorway. And on the other side is freedom, not the kind you're given, but the kind you earn. Freedom that begins where the lies end. Imagine waking up in a room with no mirrors, no names, no history, nothing to reflect back the person you've been pretending to be. No audience, no applause, just you, stripped, silent, still. Would you know who you are? That's the final question beneath all the others. Not what should I do, or what do they think of me, but this, who am I when the lies fall away? Most people never find out. They spend their lives rearranging the furniture of a false identity, tidying, polishing, improving, but never daring to ask if the house they live in was built for someone else. But once you stop lying, once the performances cease, and the silence grows loud enough, you begin to hear something ancient, something buried under layers of conditioning and fear. You hear yourself, not the one they taught you to be, not the one you invented to survive, the one who remembers. The ultimate truth is terrifying, not because it's complex, but because it's simple. You were always enough, not because you achieved something, not because you perfected anything, but because you exist. But the world couldn't profit from that truth. It needed you to strive, to doubt, to consume, to compare, to conform. So it whispered, you're too much here, not enough there, change, improve, hide that part, amplify this one. And you obeyed until you forgot the original language of your soul. But truth is patient. It never stops whispering. It's been calling to you in quiet moments, in long walks, in tears you couldn't explain. in dreams that made no sense but refused to die. It's there in the ache behind your smile, in the discomfort behind your applause, in the pause after someone asks, "Are you happy?" You are not broken. You are buried. The pain you carry is not evidence of failure, it's evidence of falseness. Your suffering is the friction between the life you live and the truth you avoid. That's why it hurts. That's why no amount of success satisfies. Why no relationship completes you. Why no escape quiets the longing. Because you were never meant to live in a costume. And the longer you wear it, the heavier it becomes. But here is the final paradox, the one the world doesn't want you to know. When you stop pretending, you become unstoppable. When you live without lies, you don't become less loved, you become truly seen. You don't lose power, you embody it. Because people don't follow perfection, they follow authenticity. They crave it. They're starving for someone, anyone, who will stop the charade and speak what is real. That someone can be you, not because you've mastered life, but because you've chosen to live it truthfully. You are not here to fit in. You are here to wake others up. Every time you speak the truth, even trembling, you give someone else permission to do the same. You become a lighthouse, a living contradiction to the lie that says we must become someone else to be worthy. You show by example that worth is not earned, it's remembered. But truth is not a destination. It's a practice, a daily shedding, a sacred discipline, a relentless choosing. You will forget, you will slip, you will fall into old patterns. But every morning, you get to begin again. And the more you return to truth, the stronger you become. Not in arrogance, but in alignment. Not with ego, but with essence. In the end, all philosophies, all therapies, all spiritual paths lead here. To remember who you are and live like it's true. To stop performing. To stop apologizing for your depth. To stop negotiating with shame. To stand, not in the spotlight, but in the light of your own soul. And say, this is me. No edits, no lies. So, what now? You don't need a grand plan. You don't need permission. You just need to choose. Right now, in this breath, you can begin again. Not by doing something dramatic, but by doing something true. That text you didn't send because you were afraid, send it. That conversation you've been avoiding, have it. That secret you've been carrying, name it. Truth is not about volume. It's about integrity. It's about no longer participating in your own diminishment. Because here is what they never told you. You don't owe anyone your silence. You don't owe the world your compromise. You owe yourself your truth. That's it. And once you live that truth not once, but consistently, something magical happens. You become indivisible, untouchable by shame, unshaken by rejection, and moved by manipulation. Because you know who you are. And no one, not a boss, not a parent, not a culture can take that from you. So live like you have nothing to prove. Love like you have nothing to hide. And speak like your voice was made to disturb the silence. Because it was. Final words. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to be fearless. You just need to be honest. That's enough to change everything. And when the world asks why you stopped pretending, why you stopped pleasing, why you started walking with fire in your eyes and peace in your chest, tell them the truth. I got tired of living someone else's lie. And I finally remembered who I am.